We have Conrad Reynolds joining the discussion. Conrad Reynolds, of course, running for the House of Representatives to replace French Hill. He's running in the primary against French Hill. Conrad, I should say Colonel Reynolds, welcome to the show. It's good to have you on again.
Man, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Glad to be here, as always.
Not a problem. So we had your nemesis, if you if you want to say it that way, on yesterday, talking about the State of the Union address and some of the concept or some of the nonsense that went on there. Let's start with that, Conrad. Let's talk about the State of the Union address and kind of get your thoughts on it and where we're at with it.
Well, I think y'all covered it very well. In fact, I did listen to your show and listen to my opponent and the things that he said. I think that the State of the Union is pretty much a clown show, like was said by just about everybody that I've heard. I mean, it was really ridiculous. I'm very embarrassed by this particular president, as a lot of people are, and I think he's one of the main reasons that we see Ukraine, we see what Russia is doing now. You know, when foreign countries see a weak president and a weak Congress, these bad things happen. And we learned that way back in 1939, and we need to go back and review that, because it seems like a lot of things are happening now that we could compare to that time in our history.
So when we start talking about dealing with places like Ukraine and Russia and what's going on there now, you, of course, your military background as a colonel in the United States Army, you've got some significant experience in dealing with these sorts of situations. What's the best path forward? Because like I've said, I don't want to see boots on the ground. I don't want to see American soldiers put in harm's way to fight back or to push back this psychopath that is Vladimir Putin. So
yeah, I don't think anybody does, and I think that we are entering into a whole new world now, because we've got bullies of the past. You can go in and defeat them. Now you have a bully that has a nuclear weapon, many of them, and so it's a whole different ball game now. And so and you have to be very careful about cornering somebody. To the point, in this case, Putin, where he has nuclear weapons and he put him in a corner. Now what? So it's a whole new world on how we're going to handle this. I don't have all the answers. I certainly don't have access to the current intelligence to make a really, truly an informed decision or opinion. I will just tell you that, in my experience, if you let bullies get away with things, they continue to do more and more and more, and they push the envelope. So it's going to be a tough decision. I think sanctions are going to be the most important thing right now. Strict sanctions. I don't know why we're still buying oil from Russia. I do not understand that at all.
Yeah.
And I think that it shows the stupidity of this administration of when they close down our own oil production and our quest for energy independence. We were independent, and they sidetracked that. So we need to get back to that immediately. When I go to Congress, it's one of the things that we're going to make sure we do, is become energy independent again. Because if you think gas prices are high now, just wait. They're going to get a lot higher. We've got to open the Keystone. And like I say, we just got to get back to the Trump policies that were so effective when he was president.
Is it too late for the Keystone pipeline? I know I can't think of the name of the company now off the top of my head that was planning on building the Keystone XL pipeline. But have they just simply said, yeah, we've invested enough, we're done? I mean, 10, 12 years of effort and all of this, and then with a stroke of a pen, Biden shuts it down. Have they just walked away and said we're going to do something else instead? I don't think so. Don't quote me on that. I'm just saying it looks like to me from the obvious. I'm not an oil man, but I know there's a lot of wells in cap. But I do think that that's something that we need to be looking at. We've got to be energy independent. We cannot be dependent upon Russia or any other country, Saudi Arabia or anywhere else. We can't be dependent on those. So we have enough fuel to last us for hundreds of years if we would just simply use it and unleash the oil folks out there to make it happen. So anyway. Yeah, another thing that was talked about in the State of the Union address was some just more of spending, right? We're going to spend billions more on all of the COVID stuff. We're going to spend billions more on this, billions more on that. And at the same time, an announcement, I think Monday, maybe it was last weekend, I don't remember when, but there was an announcement that literally, tens of billions of dollars in fraud has been discovered in this COVID relief money that's went out the first time. I mean, is there ever a point where we just go and ask for a full-on audit of basically every government entity available and in existence?
I think that'd be great. I don't know that we're going to get a full audit, but I would love to have an audit of everything. In the military, we audited everything. We had to account for every dollar that went out. And I don't know why we're not making the government do that, the federal government do that, and these other agencies. The spending thing that you just brought up is a key point. It's one of the things that I've been focusing on as a congressional candidate. I'm so sick of people telling me it's Democrats spending. It's not. It's not just the Democrats. It's Republican.
Yeah.
Rich Hill was on there yesterday talking about, he's a conservative, doesn't want spending. Well, you asked him about H.R. 550, right? You asked him about H.R. 550.
Yes, yep.
Which is the Education Infrastructure Modernization Act, right?
Yeah.
You know how much that bill was going to be? $400 million.
Right.
And you know what else that they did? And this is something Mr. Hill won't tell you, but they put it into what's called the suspension bill. And I think your listeners need to know this. What suspension means is that they suspend all the rules, and they just simply put it in, and they try to fast track it so that there's no debate, and they just try to push it on through. And the very first sentence of that bill, he said it was written by a Dr. Bouchon. Bouchon, by the way, is not a conservative. He's a Republican, but there's a difference between a conservative and a Republican, right? But he got a 54 score from the Club for Growth. He's not really conservative. But anyway, he wrote it, and it was a Democrat by the name of Ann Custer, who is from New Hampshire. She's the one that was a sponsor. But the very first sentence on the thing says expanding CDC and public health department capabilities. That's giving Dr. Fauci and other people in CDC control. Now, we can go into this act if we want to later, but I'm telling you, this was a bad thing. It is a vaccine tracking database. That's what it is. In fact, even, and I want to say this, Mary Miller, who is Republican of Illinois, she was one of the 130 Republicans to vote no, said that the legislation would enable the federal government to track unvaccinated Americans who will be targeted and forced to comply with Biden's crazy global vaccination vision. Now, that's a fact. That's what she said. So, I don't know how Mr. Hill wants to say he doesn't know how this got spun out of control. It's the Republicans who voted no that said it was a tracking database. And if you read it, anybody can go to my Facebook at Colonel Conrad Reynolds. Go read it. I've got it on there. Very first thing. You can read it. It's 5 pages. And you look at it yourself. Real-time reporting. It's trying to keep people, it's trying to track every American on what their vaccine status is. So I don't care how he wants to spin it. He voted for it. He was one of 80 who voted for it. And I'm telling you right now, that'll never happen. I want a conservative representative that won't vote for stuff like this.
Colonel Conrad Reynolds running for Congress, attempting to unseat incumbent French Hill. Congressman, I always want to call you Congressman because your name is Conrad, and maybe one day I actually will be calling you Congressman. So the first question I guess I've got is, or I shouldn't say the first question. The first question for this segment is: there was some expectation that there was going to be you and maybe another name on the ballot besides sitting Congressman French Hill, and that didn't materialize. It's just the two of you now. Do you think that makes it more difficult for you to unseat him in the primary or not?
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, it's a clear choice now. I mean, you can have what I call a rhino, a person who says one thing and does another. He's been doing that for 8 years, or me. And I've done everything I've done in my life shows that I will do what I say. I always have. And, I will not lie, and I'm not calling anybody a liar. I'm just saying people tend to have a way of spinning the truth, and that just drives me nuts. I want my representative to fight for me like Marjorie Taylor Greene does for her constituents, or Bowman does for her constituents. I want somebody who's fighting for me and not coming down here and on the radio and saying great things. But then when you actually look at their voting record, you actually look what they do, they're not doing any of that. I'm going to give you an example, if you don't mind. Yesterday, Mr. Hill said that he's been fighting for vaccine mandates, and he's been fighting to go against it, right?
Yeah.
My daughter works up at one of the national agencies in D.C., and she was told she didn't have, because of an executive order, if she didn't have the vaccine by 22 November, she would be fired. And she's been there 14 years. Now, she wants to get pregnant, and there's no studies that shows what these experimental vaccines would do. She didn't want to take it, but they were forcing her. Well, back in September, the Freedom Caucus, Andy Biggs, brought up a bill, H.R. 5360. It was called Freedom from Mandate Act. And he was trying to get sponsors. And one of the things that this act is, one page, basically it nullifies the executive orders that Biden signed, the one that covers all of the executive branch employees, to include all the military, to include the National Guard and the active duty military, right? Mr. Hill was asked about that on another radio show on October 3rd, 2021. And he said, oh, well, I didn't know about that. I'll go ask Andy about that, and we'll see. Well, guess what? He never got on it. He never became a co-sponsor of that. That bill was designed to get rid of the mandates early on. But Mr. Hill was nowhere to be found. And he was asked about it specifically on the radio show, and he said, nope, didn't even know about it. But that's why he's not in the Freedom Caucus. And the Freedom Caucus is one of the most conservative groups you're aware of that, I'm sure, and your listeners are. It's one of the most, founded by Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows in 2015, in order to keep the Republican ship from going too far left. And but you know what? Mr. Hill's not part of that, because you know what? You got to be invited to it, and they only invite conservatives, and he's not a conservative. Otherwise, he would be invited to be part of the group, and he's not. So I want people to listen to know that.
So speaking of inviting committees and the various committees that you could possibly be invited to. So, Congressman, the question I'm asking is you'll of course need to be on various committees. Which ones do you think would most be beneficial to people of Arkansas if you're elected, and where can you offer the most expertise?
I think I would really love to be on the HIPSI, the House Intelligence Permanent Select Committee. I think that's where my talents will really give the bang for the buck when I go up there. We need to get rid of the Adams or the Swalwells and the Adams ships off of that committee. I've said this before. I really think that we have a disservice here to the American people by having people like that serve on that committee. It has some of the most the top secret information, but the most important information that has to deal with our national security. We got to have people up there who understand what's going on in the world, but also who are not compromised like Swalwell was with Fang Fang. So I think that's extremely important. The other thing is I brought up, and something I really believe, and that is the people who serve on that committee. It's voluntary. You don't have to be there if you don't want to. They should be polygraphed. I was polygraphed. I've been polygraphed ever since I was 19 in the military. And I think that's if it's good enough for the people who work for the armed forces, it's good enough, and also all the other agencies. I think it's good enough for the people who are serving in Congress to include their staffs. So that's something I'm going to push for when I get there, and I'll be the first to take one. All
right. Well, Congressman, we're pretty much out of time for the first half hour here. Can you stick with me through the news and do one more segment with me?
You better believe it.
All right. Let's continue the conversation next. It's News Radio 102.9 KARN. Welcome back to the Schmidt Show. I'm your host, Brad Schmidt. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. 501-403-KARN, 501-403-5276 is the phone number if you want to join the conversation. Right now, Colonel Conrad Reynolds is joining the conversation. We're talking about his run for Congress as we get nearer to the the primaries coming up in May 24th. Conrad, thanks for joining me again, and appreciate you sticking on and hanging with me through the break there. As we get closer to the primaries, there's a lot that needs to be done in elections. Of course, you've got to get fundraising done. You've got to do all the stuff, shake the right hands and kiss the right babies and get all the right endorsements and all that kind of stuff. Is there anybody that you can talk about getting behind you? I mean, can we expect an endorsement from President Trump or anything like that?
No. Who knows? President Trump is his own man. I can tell you I was at CPAC last weekend, and I will tell you the excitement was incredible. And one thing that was clear, it appeared to me anyway, he wants to get rid of rhinos, number one. He wants to get rid of Democrats, number two. Number three, I think that he may be running. I can't say, he didn't say 100% sure, but he let everybody know that we would be very happy. So everybody there was saying he's running. So I hope that he is. We'll find out sooner or later. As far as people getting behind me, the Gun Owners of America gave me an A in rating, which beats my opponent, and mainly because my opponent voted for the NDAA. And for those who don't know, that the National Defense Authorization Act, which had red flag laws in there against military members. And you ought to go in there and read that. If you're a Second Amendment kind of person, you ought to go in there and read it, especially if you're military. I'm absolutely against any type of red flag laws because I think that they're just a way to take guns away from people without due process, and that's not what America is about. So anyway, the Gun Owners of America, of course, General Flynn has endorsed me, and we're expecting several other endorsements as the weeks grow on here. The Club for Growth, by the way, I got to tell you this, Club for Growth said I was a preferred candidate between me and French, and so I'll take that because they know that I'm more conservative, and my natural instincts are more conservative than his. So I'll take that. Now,
as we talk about things like General Flynn, of course, there's all of the controversy surrounding General Flynn, and I think it's probably unwarranted. He seems like a great American and a great patriot, if you ask me. But are you worried about that at all? Any of that controversy, or how do you approach that as a candidate?
No, I'm not worried about that. That man is a 33-year war hero. He is well respected by everybody that's ever been under his command. A wonderful individual, and has done more for this country and has put more on the line as far as his life or our freedoms than all these people the jackals who've got something to say about it. So I'm not too worried about those people. But anyway, it is what it is. Yeah. We're going to say bad things who you are.
Right.
But that's okay.
Well, and that's what I've talked about with President Trump, is him being the lightning rod. They're going to attack him no matter what. They're going to attack whoever the presidential nominee. I've argued in the past, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Conrad. I've argued in the past that I think Donald Trump could be more effective as a kingmaker than the actual king, and that maybe he should get behind the next up and coming candidate like a Ron DeSantis or somebody like that. What's your thoughts on that? If he does say, I'm not going to run, but I'm going to get behind somebody else.
Well, if he doesn't run, he's going to disappoint a whole lot of people. That's number one. But whatever his role is, I mean, look, he's done so much for America. He really is. I think he may even be arguably the best president in my lifetime. Look what we did look what he did in the 3 years before the pandemic. I mean, he turned his whole country around. After 8 years of Obama, my goodness, look at what he was able to accomplish. And they couldn't stand him for it, and they did everything they could to destroy him. We now know, of course, the Russia hoax. He was impeached twice, which was ridiculous. People like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and those people can't stand the Donald Trumps or his supporters. And that brings me to this January 6th debacle that they've got going on up there. My opponent, Flynn, voted for the January 6th commission. Now, arguably, the commission didn't pass, but we knew exactly what was going to happen, and it is right now. It's a committee by Nancy Pelosi put together, and it's a witch hunt, and they're out to destroy anybody that was in the Trump administration, and we should not allow that. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Liz Cheney and French Hill, he had her here, and they're best friends, and he said we need more people like her in Congress. She's one of the smartest people there. Well, I disagree. So the voting in this primary is very clear. If you want somebody who is like Liz Cheney, vote for French Hill. If you want somebody completely opposite, more like Jim Jordan, that's me.
Yeah.
So it's up to people who are listening to this radio program to go out and vote on May 24th. Tell your friends and make yourself 10 times stronger by getting 10 people to go with you to go vote.
Yeah.
And we'll make a difference in this district right here.
Well, Congressman, I keep it. I'm going to do that every time I talk to you. That's just all there is to it. It's just going to happen.
Okay.
So, it's the Colonel, it's the Conrad, it's the Congressman. I'm going to screw that up every time. So, here's I guess what has to happen is you just have to get elected and become Congressman. So when I call you that, I'm accurate in saying it.
It's going to happen, and I know it will.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to tell people that, I think people understand what's at stake here, and what's at stake is continue to elect. If you just keep electing the same people, he's been there 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what is going to change? I mean, he says he's a fiscal conservative, but he's added $13 trillion on our debt since he's been there.
Yeah.
And he's voted almost for every increase. So I think that it's time. Nothing personal. I'm not meaning to be rude or at all, because I respect his service to the state of Arkansas.
Yeah.
But I think it's time for him to go ahead and move on.
Go back to business.
That's right. Let him go back to business and do what he's doing and do what he's doing before, like all of us should. And that's why, by the way, I'm an advocate and have signed the term limits pledge. I believe in term limits. I think that if that comes across, I'm voting for it, because I think that we need term limits.
Let me ask this on term limits, because this is one of the things I hear a lot of people say. I'm in favor of term limits. Would you commit to not just signing the pledge, but would you commit to actually working to introduce legislation to bring it about?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, they've got legislation that comes by every year. It's the same bill. They just put a different number on it. And it comes through every year, and they can't get enough Republicans to vote. They're rhinos. I mean, they say one thing, but then when it comes time, they're indispensable. They want to stay there forever. I don't want to stay there forever. Yeah. I want to get this system to where people can come and serve. And like Charles de Gaulle said, right, the cemeteries are full of indispensable people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, the fact is that, in the military, we've got commanders that come in for every 3 years.
Yeah.
And they move and they get somebody else in. And we need to have good people. There are people listening to this program right now that would make a great congressman or a great congresswoman, and they could do that.
Yeah.
But we've made it so difficult. Made it so difficult. But we're going to fix that.
Yeah. Conrad, I got to run. I'm out of time. I've got to get back to the traffic and weather. We'll do this again sometime soon.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
All right. That's Conrad Reynolds. I'm Brad Schmidt.